Y'all, it's Friday, and that was Rebecca Black, bringing back a classic. Hey, y'all. So I'm a Southerner. Some of you may have known this. I dropped it into like every conversation that I had today. And it's really important for me to remind everybody of it at every possible moment, including in this presentation. So I fought for this. So we've talked a lot at boot camp about ways we can improve our marketing channels, how to create better social content and write better emails. But as has been said, all of that traffic is driving to one place, which is your website. And for many of us, our websites have remained relatively static over the last couple of years. How many people here are currently going through a website redesign or have been through one in like the last several years? Yes, yes. So the site gets redesigned, it sits on a shelf, and then in a couple of years, someone comes along and says, it's time to redesign the website, and we go through the process all over again. And those website redesigns are essential, right? They bring our sites up to current design standards, they make sure that our sites are reflective of who we are as an organization and what we stand for, and then the major goal is ultimately to improve site performance. We want our sites to perform better for our users, we want more people to do what we want them to do on the website. So that is the hope. It is not the guarantee. I think for most of us, a site that gets redesigned after 3 to 5 years is definitely going to see a lift, but we're not entirely sure about every part of the redesign, right? So today I'm talking about a different approach to websites in general, and it's this idea of iterative optimization, which we've talked about a few other times at the conference. And just so we're all on the same page, iterative optimization is this idea that we're making small changes to the site over time to lead to the same results, improved conversion rate, things like that. And we can just go ahead and make those changes, right? We could just say, OK, yeah, we're not going to redesign the site every 5 years, but every month we're just going to make a change to the site. Certainly, that's one way of doing it. But we also want to pair it with this idea of A/B testing, where we're able to take those ideas we have for those small changes and actually test them in a controlled environment. So when I talk about A/B testing on your website here today, I'm talking about serving one version of a web page to visitors and serving another version of a web page to another group of visitors in a random sample, and actually proving that these results work through statistics. And then we can feel confident going forward and making those changes, knowing that our dollars are well spent and we're not just willy-nilly asking our developers to make small changes to our website for us. So how have we done that with a few partner organizations? Talking about the Goodman here again, I know they came up in the Wolf Brown study. After a thorough analysis of the Goodman site, we saw a big opportunity to improve the performance of production detail pages on the site. These are like our star players of our website. It's where all those beautiful photos are, all of the great information. So Goodman recently had a production, actually I think it just extended, of a view from the bridge that had amazing reviews, like knockout reviews that all of us just wish every single production that came to our stages had, right? Like 12 syndicated papers talking about how great this show is. And they had put all of them in this rotating carousel on their event detail page above the video. How many people didn't notice that this was a rotating carousel until I said it? Anyone? A couple people? Yeah, I didn't notice. It took my boss, Yosef Cohen, sitting next to me and saying, why are those rotating in a carousel, for me to notice it at first. So I totally understand why they did this, right? This template probably wasn't built to support this type of content. We're working with old templates that we have to kind of bastardize to make work with new types of content we want to add to the page. They had so much review content, they needed to showcase it. They put it high up on the page. They made the font size really big. It's like a different colored text treatment. And they put it in a carousel so that we could see all of them on the page. But I would bet you that people are not sitting around reading every single review that's flashing through this carousel. We talked about attention spans. I'm not even going to go into that again. I doubt everyone has seen all of these reviews. In fact, they may not even be seeing 2 of them. So our theory was that by getting more eyes on this content, we could drive more conversions. We really believe in the power of reviews, of peer reviews, to drive sales. Our internal team that works with the Goodman had tested this out on Facebook and saw that posts with reviews in them performed really well, so we wanted to apply that to the website. So using A/B testing software, we created a new version of the page, one where we froze the rotating carousel up there on one of the reviews, and we auto-expanded the other ones in this kind of right-hand rail over here. We wanted to see, by getting more eyes on this content and repurposing existing content, we didn't create anything new, we just kind of took the existing content on the page and put it somewhere else, what could happen? So again, through online A/B testing software that I'm sort of mentioning nebulously, but we're going to talk about more specifically, I promise, we were able to send half of visitors to the view from the bridge detail page to this version, the control with the rotating carousel, and half to the test version over here. At the conclusion of this experiment, we saw a 14% lift in conversion rate just by changing the positioning of reviews on that detail page. And this was just one test that we ran over the course of a month. You can imagine if you're able to run one of these every month, what kind of lift would you see for your website? That was the desktop version of the site. We wanted to try something similar on mobile. We all know how important mobile is. There was no pre-built review module on this page, so we kind of had to come up with our own version. So we just picked 2 of the reviews, we put them on the page, we tried it out to see what would happen. At the end of this experiment, the results weren't the same. The experiment wasn't up. In fact, we lost. The control was up. The results weren't statistically significant, so we couldn't really draw any meaningful conclusion from it, but we didn't win, which was the crappy part. The takeaway here is not, don't put reviews on your mobile event detail pages. This was one version of an experiment that could have gone a lot of different ways. Maybe we picked the wrong reviews. Maybe we put them in the wrong spot on the page or didn't give them the right text treatment. Maybe by pushing content down, we made it not quite clear for visitors that there was more content further down on the page. I have no idea. All I know is that this version didn't work. So I've got one extra learning about the configuration of the page that I would try again in the future. But I believe in the value of reviews on pages. I know that mobile detail pages are important, so I want to keep optimizing this page in the future. Let's look at one other example. This is the Jacob's Pillow Dance Festival, who we also worked with on some A/B testing initiatives. Jacob's Pillow actually came to us for one of our recent tests that we ran with them and said that their box office was getting a lot of complaints from people on phones saying they couldn't figure out how to buy tickets on their phones for Jacob's Pillow. We looked into this a little bit more with them, and we saw that the only way to actually see the clear call to action when mobile visitors were landing on the homepage, which was a big point of entry for them, was to click on that menu button in the top right-hand corner. And that auto-exposed the menu, or that exposed the menu and showcased this Buy Tickets button. We've talked about friction so much and opportunities to reduce friction. This is an extra step that a user has to take to actually be exposed to this type of content. When we looked into this a little bit further, we saw that only 13% of mobile visitors to the homepage were even opening the nav in the first place. So that means 87% of people that landed on the homepage on their phones didn't see a Buy Tickets button at all. So this seems rather intuitive, but we just wanted to try reducing a step and adding the Buy Tickets button directly to the homepage. Again, it feels intuitive right now to look at it this way, but when we're designing websites, we're making hundreds, sometimes thousands of decisions about where things go. Some things just get turned over to our web developers. The idea is that once the site is built, it's beautiful, it's an improvement from the old site, but it's not perfect. It can be improved. And we can figure out how it can be improved through testing initiatives like this. So this was our test version of the page. Again, our goal here was to just reduce barriers to conversion, this idea we didn't want the user to think about what the next step was going to be. Let's just give it to them straight. We also added a second option in here just to browse the season. We saw that 70% of visitors coming through this channel to the homepage were new, so we wanted to provide an option for browsing as well. Same thing here, 50-50 split for mobile visitors to the homepage. And at the end of this experiment, we saw a 19% lift in views of the ticketing site and a 17% lift in views of the season's listings page. Again, this is a process, not a playbook for best design practices for your website. Please do not write down, go back to my desk, add reviews to desktop detail pages, no reviews on mobile pages, put Buy Tickets button on mobile homepage. Please do not do that. That is not the takeaway. If that's what you leave here with, I have failed you. Please don't do that. It's a process. You have to go home. You have to look at your own data to figure out where to prioritize on your own site, and you have to run your own tests. And we'll talk a lot more about that in this session. So just a quick summary, why are we talking about A/B testing and iterative optimization? Because it is quick. You can conduct these tests so quickly. You're able to reuse existing content. You're not designing brand new content modules for your site. Save that for the designers. You're able to test these things in a low-risk environment, so you don't have to invest the development resources up front. You can actually have confidence in your results using these platforms that you can then take to your developers to advocate for your change and back up the dollars spent. And ultimately, you're making small changes versus these large overhauls. So if we're invested in creating a culture of experimentation and learning and cultivating this growth mindset at our organization, this is a great way to start thinking about your website. We've talked about iterative optimization here at Bootcamp before. Last year, Yosef talked about it. But in the past year, there are new tools on the market that make the process even easier for marketers. Google just rolled out their own proprietary testing tool, Google Optimize. It's free, it's powerful, and it integrates with our favorite analytics tool, Google Analytics, to take advantage of the really powerful targeting and reporting tools. So what I'm really here to talk about is how you can do this. How can you be the agent of optimization at your organization? I'm literally going to give you the 10 steps that you can take to get started with these tests, start to finish. Everything from looking at your data, to executing your first test, to building a testing strategy at your organization. I'm going to give you a heads up. The first part is like really heavily front-loaded, so a lot of the slides are going to come at the beginning, and then we're just going to get rolling from steps like 5 onwards. So I'm just setting expectations here. All right, so the first thing you have to do, this is necessary, it's a little bit scary. You must audit your Google Analytics data. You gotta log in, you guys. You gotta go in, and you gotta look at it. It's essential, right? We must have good data to be data-driven, and the only way to know if you have good data is to audit it. It's a sad word. We should come up with a better word than audit. So log into Google Analytics, please. We need to look at our data because we need to prioritize. We need good data to tell us where on our sites there's room for opportunity, room to optimize. And we also need good data to judge our tests fairly. If we have bad data and we're using that data to say like this experiment won or lost, that's just like fake, it's not real. So the data has to be good. So how can you audit your Google Analytics setup? I'm going to give you a couple quick things you can do. You can go in and check, set up, look into, just so you know what to do next. All right, we'll start with a baby step. You have to check a box. You're going to log in, you're going to go to your admin settings, and you're going to make sure you have this feature checked to exclude spam. I realize this is small. It's in the view settings. It says exclude all hits from known bots and spiders. You're just allowing Google Analytics, it has like a detected list of spam bots, and you're just saying, keep this out of my data. I only want my data to be reflective of real user behavior on my website. There's still some loopholes there. Spam can still get into your account. So rather than try and like whack-a-mole all the spam that's making it into your Google Analytics account, you're going to set up this one catch-all filter that says, only include traffic in Google Analytics that's reflective of people who are actually on my website. So if you know the URL for your website, you too can build this filter. And finally, you're going to want to exclude your internal traffic. We are not our primary users. You know, our website is our homepage. We go to it all the time. We're like working with our development team to make sure the sponsors list is up to date. We're going to like corners of the website that people are not going to on a regular basis. And especially if we're a small organization and we have staff that are really active on the website, that data could be sort of skewing the numbers that we're seeing. So figure out what your IP address is. If you don't know what your IP address is, you can literally Google what's my IP address, and a little widget pops up. Google knows that nobody knows what their IP address is, so they created a tool for it, which I think is amazing. And you'll just exclude your IP address, again, using Google Analytics filters. So now you're in a really good spot to make sure that your data is reflective of real user behavior, visitors to your website, your patrons. Check your bounce rate. Bounce rate is a great metric for helping us understand the health of our website. It's the percentage of people that come to our site, only see one page, and then leave. It's also very easily skewed. It's very temperamental. It's affected by a bad Google Analytics configuration, so it's a great diagnosis point for that. So if you log in and you see something like this, when you're looking at your bounce rate trended over time, it just drops off a cliff, you have a problem. If your bounce rate is below 10%, you might think, oh my God, 90% of the people who come to my site see multiple pages. I'm killing it. You're not. Nobody's that good. You have a problem. Probably. It's the end of the day, you guys. So we're all hanging out together. So this probably means that your Google Analytics page view tag is placed multiple times on your pages. I'm not even going to get into like the technical stuff behind this, but if you see a really low bounce rate, go in and look at this. It's bad. Talk to your web person. If you are the web person, like see if you can find that extra code and remove it. If your bounce rate is too high, it doesn't mean you're a terrible marketer. The flip side of that, we often see that an average bounce rate for arts organizations is anywhere between 30 and 50%. If you're on just the edges of that, I wouldn't worry too much. But if you're seeing something like 70, 80, 90%, you might want to dig in a little bit further. You may have this issue we call cross-domain or cross-subdomain tracking, which is a really scary word, but I'll just illustrate it with an example. So if you have your primary website, let's call it arts.org, and to buy a ticket, I have to go to tickets.arts.org or cart.arts.org. That's a subdomain. In order for Google Analytics to follow the session from the main site when they go over to the ticketing site, you need to set up illustrating, you need to set up cross-subdomain tracking. Same thing if I go from arts.org to like tickets.com, just like a completely separate website, that's cross-domain tracking. It is technical. It does require a bit of a technical setup, but it's really good just to go ahead and flag and be like, that might be me. I should look into it. Just something to think about. You're not going to be able to track a user when they land on your main site from your campaign and be able to attribute any revenue earned on the ticketing site back to that campaign if you don't have this set up. So this needs to go on the to-do list. If you think this might be an issue for you, check out this report in Google Analytics. It's the referrals report. If you see your own website showing up at the top, I looked at our raw data to get this as an example. Otherwise, it would look really bad for us. And if you see your website at the top of that referrals report with a lot of traffic coming in, that's just another good diagnosis that this might be an issue for you. OK, this is important. If you sell things on your website, track it. If selling things on your site is one of the major goals of your website, the only way to report on the percentage of people coming to your website that buy things is to actually have that tracked in Google Analytics. This is part of your e-commerce configurations. Please check on it, see that you have it if you do sell things. If it looks like it's configured, you go to these e-commerce reports and you see something there, just gut check it against your internal database just to make sure the numbers mostly line up. You don't want to be interpreting, again, bad data. If it's not configured, you have a huge opportunity to really enrich the data being collected in your Google Analytics account, to add something to that. Otherwise, you have a huge blind spot. You know that people are coming to your site. Maybe you know a little bit about what they're doing, but do they buy a ticket? I don't know. If you don't have this report configured, you have no idea. This is easier than ever to set up. Many of your ticketing platforms can actually help you with this. So if you should be seeing this data and you're not, please talk to them. And then once they're configuring it on their end, it's just a little checkbox you need to check in your admin settings in Google Analytics. I recognize that this is difficult and frustrating, and many of you might have tried to get this set up and are not able to. If that is the case, please come talk to me afterwards or email me. I'd be happy to point you in the right direction. OK, so that's your audit. We're making sure our data is reflective of real user behavior by excluding spam, that our page view tag is placed correctly, and that we have cross-domain tracking configured if we need it. And we're going to get e-commerce set up, and we're going to make sure it's recording the right data. OK. So now let's step back. Let's think about our website from a 10,000-foot view and ask ourselves, what is the purpose of the website? When we know our purpose of our website, we can identify the metrics, or KPIs, key performance indicators, that actually tell us if we're doing a good job at meeting that objective. So what is the purpose of your website? Just think about it for a second. Probably, whether we want to admit it or not, it's to sell tickets and generate revenue for the organization. For many of us, I'm not going to say for all of us, and I'll talk about the rest of you in a second. If the purpose of your website is to sell tickets and generate revenue for your organization, or that's one of the big goals, please have e-commerce configured in Google Analytics. That's the only way you're going to know if your site is actually doing that for you. If you are a visual arts organization, perhaps your primary goal is to provide contextual information about the visit or get users to engage with your digital content. Maybe you have a different objective or a secondary objective, like engagement with education materials or drive registrations. All of those are very real and valid goals for websites. If that is the case, you'll want to configure Google Analytics goals. These are the other conversion mechanism in Google Analytics that let you report on a conversion rate for those other things that are important to you beyond e-commerce. So if I'm a visual arts organization, I want to know the percentage of people that go to my hours and admissions page, or the people that view art in my collection, or that download an education resource or watch a video. You can calculate a conversion rate for all of those things using goals. Also, goals are the primary measurement language of Google Optimize, which we'll talk about in a little bit. So it's really important that you have at least some of them configured and that they are working properly. It's not enough just to set them up. They actually have to be collecting data and functioning. So check on them. There'll be a little number off to the right that tells you how many goals are completed. This one can really come at any point, but it worked super well in the presentation as number 3. So it's number 3. At some point, you'll want to create a Google Optimize account and get that code installed on your website. Very easy to set up the account. It's as easy as creating a Gmail account. And you'll be given step-by-step instructions for getting it set up. My one caveat here is it's going to give you an option to set it up through Google Tag Manager, which I know many of you use. I would not do it that way. I would set it up directly on your website. It's a little bit irritating, but it's going to give you better results. There have been some tracking issues reported when it's set up through Google Tag Manager. Once that's configured, we're just going to do a quick sanity check. We are installing software on the website. We want to make sure it's working properly. So we're going to run an AA test to ensure Google Optimize is configured correctly. This is a great way to dip your toes into A/B testing because it's not even a real test. An AA test is literally where it's sending 50% of visitors to one version of the page and 50% of visitors to a basically identical version of the page. They're not going to be able to tell the difference. We're just going to trick the platform into thinking it's a test by adding a space to the footer. So the software thinks we're running an experiment, but when we look at our results, it should be the same results for group A and the same results for group B. It should look identical. If it's really off, check that your code didn't break the website, because that's probably what's happening. So hopefully it's just whew, the results are the same. We can move on. Happy, happy testing time. So an AA test, great way to just get familiar with the platform, which I'll show you in a bit, and just make sure that everything is configured properly. OK. So where on the site are we actually going to run our experiments? Where do we want to optimize? Where do we want to improve performance? It can be really tempting, now that you have software that can back these things up, to say, I've always hated this button, and no one will listen to me, and this is my opportunity to prove that the button sucks and advocate that we change it. Sure, you can do that. But I know you guys are leaving this conference with a huge to-do list, and I worry that if we approach A/B testing that way, you're going to be disillusioned really quickly, and you're not going to want to keep doing it. So I'm trying to give you steps that will actually make you want to keep A/B testing and are going to gear you up for success. So data over instinct. We can use our gut to guide us, but ultimately let's use data to help us prioritize and focus on areas with really high opportunity that we can optimize on the site. So we're going to do this by putting our analyst hats on. And I promise it's not as scary as it sounds. I'm literally going to show you the exact reports you need to look at in Google Analytics to get answers to these questions. But let's just talk really quickly about what the 3 big questions are we're going to ask our data to start kind of telling that story of where people are going on our site and where we have the opportunity to optimize. So the 3 questions are, who are the users coming to my site? What is the content they are most interested in? And how does that content perform for key user segments? So we're really just telling a story of user behavior on our website to help guide us in our optimization journey. My colleague in the green room called it the magic school bus of A/B testing that we're all about to go on together. So we could call it that. So the first question we want to answer, who are the users coming to my site? It may be hard to see. Did you guys know that mobile is important? Did you know that? This is the mobile overview report in Google Analytics. I'm not going to talk about how important mobile is. You know. But what you may not know is how important it is to your specific audience. So please check out this report in Google Analytics. It's in the audience section under mobile overview. It's just going to tell you about your web visitors and how they like to access your site. So let's just look at this to kind of start telling our story here. I'm seeing a pretty even split between desktop and mobile. 48% of users access my site on a desktop device. 40% of sessions are coming on mobile. Then I'm going to want to look at bounce rate to get a sense of engagement. And here, for those who can't see the numbers, it's 27% for desktop and 42% for mobile. So almost twice on mobile what it is for desktop. This is starting to tell me that same amount of traffic coming from each device, but big optimization opportunity for mobile engagement. And then I'm going to look at my e-commerce conversion rate, which I don't have unless I have e-commerce configured and working properly. And I'm going to see conversion rate for each of those devices. And this is pretty familiar. We're seeing a 7% conversion rate for desktop, a higher conversion rate for desktop, 1.82% for mobile. So a really big gap there. And I am not saying, please do not write this down, Jenny said that if I do A/B testing, I can get my mobile users to convert at the same rate as my desktop users. I'm not saying that. But I am hoping that we can close the gap a tiny bit through these initiatives and through kind of fixing those pain points, those points of friction for our mobile visitors. So the story here is mobile is just as important as desktop, but it underperforms. Are these new visitors to your site, or have they been here before? I think this is less of who we optimize for, but more just to have a sense of who our content should speak to on our website. So in this example, this is literally the new versus returning visitors report. It's very aptly named. I have 61% of my traffic coming from new visitors, 38% from returning visitors. Pretty even bounce rate, and conversion rate makes sense here. A new visitor, we know it takes multiple touch points for people to actually buy a ticket. So this is somewhat expected, 2.92% versus 5.7% for returning visitors. I think you all will kind of be surprised at how much of your traffic comes from new visitors. I always am when I see these numbers. And when we look into it a little bit deeper, we often see a story like this, where most returning visitors are still very new in their experience. I think in this example, it's 73% or something of visitors who are on their first or second session to the site. So these are people who are definitely not familiar with their website. Most of your visitors are not familiar with the intuitive nature of your website, how to go through the path to buy a ticket. And it could also mean that many of these people are not familiar with who you are as an organization. So if you're driving traffic really deep on the site, like to a detail page, not the home page where we really get all of that branding, think about if those users really understand who you are, what you stand for, and what they can get out of your organization. Just something to think about when you're creating content and thinking about your experiments. So what is the content these people are most interested in? For this, you're going to go into the behavior section of Google Analytics, site content, all pages. This is one of the most powerful reports in Google Analytics. It's going to tell you a running list of every page that people have visited on your website and some metrics about them. Here we want to look at page views and unique views to get a sense of content popularity. Where is most of my content being consumed? And then we want to look at entrances and bounce rate. So what are my top landing pages? And then let's look at their bounce rate to see how well they're serving us as landing pages. Those are the metrics I would really suggest looking at. I'm grouping my pages here by content grouping. So rather than looking at individual URLs, I'm able to group them together in like meaningful aggregated buckets. Makes it a lot easier to do this analysis. Content groupings are pretty easy to set up in your admin settings. They take a little bit of time, but it's going to make this analysis so painless. If you are just somewhat familiar with your URL structure, you can kind of start knocking these off the list. I know that all my tickets pages have /ticket/, so I'm going to make a group of pages with that in the URL structure, and then I'm able to analyze them in aggregate. It's a really, really powerful tool. I highly recommend setting them up. OK, so last question, how do those pages perform for key user segments? So once I've identified my top pages, in this example, it's our blog posts, I'm going to pull in those segments from earlier, like device type, and make sure my story still holds true. I know that blog posts are important. I know mobile is important. How do mobile visitors interact with my blog content? I'm using the secondary dimension feature here in Google Analytics, which allows me to take information from another report and pull it into the report that I'm looking at. It's a really useful tool, fun to play around with. You can't break anything in Google Analytics by just like clicking around on stuff. You can only break things by going in the admin settings, so just be careful there. But click around on everything else. OK, so now it's time to actually determine what to build. We're getting into the fun, like let's actually build the experiment part of the presentation. So what do we actually build? How do we solve for these problems? How do we fix these areas of opportunity? What is kind of the design thinking behind it? The most important thing, no matter what you create, is to always think like a user. Take off your marketing hat, put yourself in the shoes of your user. Now you're wearing a completely different outfit. But I just thought of that one. But seriously, in all seriousness, it's so important to think like your user and put them first. They want things from your website. They are telling you with data. You've just kind of told that story of their journey. So think about what they would want. A really unofficial way that you can figure this out is through some like very simple user testing. And I have to put it in quotes because there are like people who devote their lives to real user testing. And this is like helpful, but it's not real user testing. If you have like a spouse or a partner or a friend who's not familiar with the way your site works, just watch them use it. Watch them go to the templates that you want to prioritize based on your data, have them narrate their path as they try and buy a ticket. What are they getting frustrated by? What do they wish was on the page instead? If you know you need to think about mobile, make sure you watch them do it on a mobile device. It might be an uncomfortable conversation, but it's really going to help get you inspired about ways you could improve these templates. Always keep it simple and intuitive. That speaks for itself. Reduce friction, reduce barriers to conversion. This is a great framework from Wider Funnel. We want to ask ourselves, is the template relevant? Is it what a user would expect when they land on the page? Is the information clear and delivered in a hierarchical, sensible way? Have we taken steps to reduce anxiety or uncertainty? Is there anything about the template that would make the user not trust their experience? Have we reduced distraction? Have we made sure that our call to action is the primary point of focus on the page? And have we created a sense of urgency if one doesn't exist in the user inherently? If you get stuck, these are some best practice sites you can turn to. I look at these a lot when I'm running tests. ConversionXL.com and the Optimizely blog. They're very helpful if you're feeling a little stuck and you just need some ideas of maybe things to test. But remember that best practices are not the best forever. ConversionXL, the example from the last slide, releases this ebook every year called What Works Best Right Now, 2017. Because these things change every single year. What we want as digital consumers changes every year. What we expect, and a lot of that is like precedent setting from the bigger e-commerce giants out there that are training people how to engage digitally. So this stuff changes. And often our sites were probably designed with best practices from like 2013, or whenever the site was last redesigned. And often, based on something that our design agency knew or was working with at the time. So these things change and they evolve, so just be a little bit careful. And we also have to remember that design best practices are not the best for everyone. So what works for your colleagues at other organizations may not work for you. But you might be asking yourself, Jenny, I just did this thorough analysis of user behavior. I know the whole story of my web visitors. And my husband said that this button was ugly, so why can't I just go to my developer and have him change the button? It all lines up with my data, it all makes sense. Why can't I just do it? I don't want to do the test, I just want to make the change. We talked about this a little bit, I think Colleen talked about this. Correlation does not equal causation. If we make the change and then we go to look at our data and we see that results are up or results are down, we don't know that it was our experiment or our change that actually resulted in those results. There are a lot of things that impact our data beyond just the things we're changing on our website, be it the weather, what's on our stages, Mercury being in retrograde, who knows? But you're not able to actually prove that it was your change that led to the results. So let's actually prove it. Let's build an experiment so we can run a test in a controlled environment. So switching platforms here, we're now going to take a look at Google Optimize. So the next couple of slides are just going to be looping GIFs that kind of show you how to work in this platform, how easy it is to actually build and create your own experiments. So super easy to set up the framework for an experiment. It's just a lot of clicking. You're going to set this up. You're going to go in. You're going to pick an editor page that you're going to be working off of. You are literally making changes to the page yourself in this platform. It's super easy. We're built with our control version already. We just have to go in and create our experiment version or our variant. This is the one that we're going to make our change to, that after all of our user-focused thinking, we're ready to build. And then we're going to jump right into Optimize's kind of WYSIWYG editor, which is just it's element-based, so it allows us just to click on elements of the page and make changes right within it. So we're going to be working on Goodman's site. There's lots of things we can edit and optimize. It's super, super easy to edit things like element text and color. Again, we're doing this in Optimize. We don't have to have access to a backend CMS. We don't have to have access to the HTML of the site. We can do it all in Optimize just by clicking and editing. There's tons of things we can change about the elements of the page: text size, text alignment, font, the size of the element itself, the color. Maybe we think we want to try a new call to action color. Definitely not that. Maybe something like that instead. It's just clicking and dragging. It's doing what Google does so well, which is user interface and user experience. This is something that you can do. I had a very preliminary understanding of HTML and CSS when I got started with this. I know more from research and reading and taking a couple online Code Academy courses, but I am not a developer. I am not a web designer. This is all about proof of concept, testing an idea so that then you can take it to the professionals and they can create it, but you've been able to prove that it works. A couple other things we can edit using Optimize. We can remove elements. I got a little delete happy here, but it's very easy just to click and remove elements if we're thinking about adding through subtraction, reducing distraction, reducing noise on the page. In a matter of seconds, we can clean up the area maybe around our primary CTA, see if that drives the eye a little bit towards what we actually want users to accomplish. Some of that might have been a little bit controversial. Got rid of the promo box in case anybody noticed that. We can think about hierarchy. We talked about review content being so important. Maybe we believe that by moving the Christmas Carol review higher up on the page, we can get more eyes on it before users click away or they scroll just to the video or something like that. So just clicking and dragging, moving that up on the page, making it a little bit more visible. Again, we're not creating new content. We're just reorganizing content on the page here. We can do the same thing in mobile. Google Optimize comes with a built-in mobile view. We know the screen resolution is different. We're just going to have to make different types of changes here. Again, we're just clicking and dragging, moving that review content a little bit higher up, maybe repositioning it because the page looks a little bit different. Perhaps we want to resize it so it's not quite up against the edges of it. We want to give it a little bit more white space. Just a click and a drag using Optimize. Again, this is so easy. All of these tests can be built in a matter of seconds, maybe a matter of minutes. There are certainly more complex things you can build out in here, but it's very easy to get started with the small things. Once we've built our variant or our experiment version of the page, it's time to kind of frame it. So we're going to go ahead and put in our testing hypothesis. What do we believe will happen as a result of this experiment, and how do we want to measure it? So this is where Google Analytics goals become really important. Do we want to improve conversion rate? We can pull in transactions. Do we want more people to view a video? We can pull in view a video from our goals. So we definitely want to make sure we have those set up. We also have really robust targeting features thanks to integration with Google Analytics and things like that, and also just the same kind of framework in which Google thinks about analytics they've brought into Optimize. At the experiment level, we can mitigate risk here by only including a percentage of our site visitors in the experiment. So if we're kind of worried about like, people feel really weird about us adding something to the site navigation, well, maybe I can tell them I'm just going to show it to 25% of people, and then they won't be so stressed out. I usually just go with everybody. Hopefully, you're not starting off with like the riskiest experiment. We can also then decide what percentage of visitors see the control versus the experiment. I just recommend going for 50-50 here. It's going to make interpreting your results a lot easier. And then we can further segment at the bottom. Is it just people who see the Christmas Carol page, or is it people who see every event detail page? And let's make sure that the element we're editing, if that's the case, is consistent across all those pages. Just keep that in mind. Quickly say if we want this to show to desktop or mobile visitors or any of these other variables that Google Optimize makes available, all the way to like custom JavaScript variables. So if you are working with a really technical, like high-functioning team that's like really excited to get started with this, you could dive right in with the more technical stuff. But it's also very easy to run simple and quick tests using some of the smaller, more broad segmenting features. We're almost ready to go live with our experiment. It's always important to test and then test again. So just make sure you preview before you go live. Even though we're not directly editing the code of the page, Optimize is doing that on our behalf. There is the opportunity that we can break things, and we don't want to make our website people angry. So let's go in and preview the changes that we've made on our site. This is like a 15-20-minute process. You're just going to go in, you're going to click around, make sure videos still play, buttons still take you where you want buttons to take you, that everything still looks good, and that your experiment is rendering properly. Then you're going to push that start button in the top right corner, and you're going to push your experiment live. Woo! This is so exciting and so simple that it's literally just one slide. I told you we were just going to be chugging right along at the end, but I didn't tell you it's because some of the sections had no slides in them. So throughout the experiment, it's really important to be measuring and monitoring our results. Google Optimize comes with built-in reporting. It's very pretty. It's going to tell you when a clear winner has been found based on its own modeling. I think it's nice to look at, but I really recommend setting up a custom report in Google Analytics where you can pull in all the same variables and then some. Google Optimize will try and upgrade you and try and get you to get the more advanced version, and it'll say you can pull in more goals and targeting objectives. You can do all of that in Google Analytics. You can keep using the free version of Optimize. Again, it's free, and measure it in Google Analytics with very advanced reporting there. So you're going to pull in your experiment into GA and set up a report so you can keep monitoring your results. Before you end your test, we're going to take it back to that one statistics class we took in college or high school, whenever it was, I'm sorry, and just think about a couple things that are important so we can make sure we're actually interpreting our results correctly. One, make sure you run these tests for long enough. It's not enough just to run them for a day or two. 2 weeks minimum, but if possible, I'd say 3 or 4 weeks. We want to make sure it covers a normal sales cycle. It's really important to generate a large enough sample size. If we only have 30 people for whom we're interpreting results, things are going to be skewed. It's going to be wacky. We can't trust it. So we want a big enough sample size. And we want to make sure our results are statistically significant, which just makes sure that when we replicate this in the real world, it's going to look the same as we're seeing in our experiment. So that's like a number that helps us guarantee that. Fortunately, you don't have to do this math yourself. I do not know the formula for calculating sample size. I have no idea what it is. Please do not ask me. Fortunately, there are great tools online that help figure this out for us. I think this is from Optimizely that will tell you kind of the sample size that you need to guarantee that you can interpret your results correctly. And Kissmetrics has a great one for calculating statistical significance. I think this has been mentioned, but you're getting all these presentations at the end of this. So if you didn't write down a report or you didn't write down a tool, they're all going to be there, don't worry. These are bookmarked for me. They're super helpful. Once we're confident that our results are good, the sample size is large enough, things are probably significant, we can really dive into the results. So always look at your results from a high level, but also segment them. Make sure you're breaking it down by things like device category, user type. You can use actual Google Analytics segments feature to drill down even further if you have a really big sample size. So as you're running these experiments, you may encounter this feeling that I also encounter, which is the humbling nature of A/B testing. You can feel so confident that your idea is like the best idea and you're going to win. And sometimes you do win, and it's amazing, and it feels so good. Just you wait. Oh, I didn't even think about it. It's just ingrained in me to my core. More often than not, testing feels a little bit like this. It's so tragic. Guys, he got it. He got his Oscar, so we can stop feeling bad for him. And we can stop feeling bad for me, because I won my experiment, and you. Sometimes you lose, and it's OK, because you're still learning about your audience. You're learning about your users. And then sometimes, this is why it's really important to double check your results. You don't want to misinterpret them. I had so many options here, you guys. I had like La La Land and Moonlight at the Oscars, but this one was just too tragic to not include. OK, coming in on the end here. Let's bring it back. This is a process, and it is a mindset. It's like the one thing where losing is still an OK thing, because you're learning. You're learning about your audience. Every experiment teaches you something new about what your users like, what they don't like, and what they respond to. It's just a little bit of information in your pocket to inform the next test. So now you have your test results. It's time to act. A/B testing in and of itself is not actually optimization. I love this quote. It is an investment in information. We are learning about our audience. We are gleaning information about them so that we can optimize the site. If you are correct, fabulous. You get to implement with confidence. You can go to your developers, and you have the data to back up your design choices. You can also apply these learnings to other areas of the site, and these things can translate to marketing initiatives as well. If you make mistakes, that's OK. If you are wrong, you can go back to the drawing board. I have made my fair share of mistakes at Capacity and elsewhere. This is in our office, and I am so grateful for it. Just keep it in mind, it is OK to make mistakes. We're just going to go back to the drawing board and try something different. So it's not enough to just conduct one test. Google Optimize is super fun to play around in. Don't get burnt out with it quickly. It really is so powerful to build a testing strategy for you and your organization. It is important, however, and this really thrives in a culture of experimentation. We talked about the importance of organizational culture earlier. A culture of experimentation, this is another great quote, failure isn't punished, insights and learning are rewarded, and team members are encouraged to innovate and discover new ways of growth. I feel fortunate to work in an office like this. Many of you may feel fortunate to also work in an office like this. Some of us may work places that are a little bit more rigid, that may not value experimentation, risk-taking, and failure as much. So in turn, how can you use A/B testing in this process? How can you be scrappy and advocate for the process, advocate for A/B testing at your organization from your desk? Start simple. Do not go for the most complicated, crazy, like wacky thing you can think to test on the site. Remember to focus on areas of high opportunity. Go for the low-hanging fruit. I hate that term, but it works really well here. Just go for that. Try and prove it. Prove that it works. You can also gamify it. No one said that A/B testing can't be fun. Sorry. So this is an idea that came from another organization. I was reading a lot about testing strategy, and they have a leaderboard, so they let people submit test ideas. You can back those ideas up with data before you execute them, and then you can record who has like won or lost the most tests. We can reward failure here as well. There's another great organization called Porch, and the person that like fails the hardest that week gets a stuffed animal called Mr. Sparkles. Mr. Sparkles is like a rainbow unicorn or something like that, and he sits on your desk if you like broke the site with your test. And the CEO comes by and like high fives you and asks you what you did to get Mr. Sparkles. In this situation, Yosef would get Mr. Sparkles for the week. Not all of us work in like a Mr. Sparkles appropriate organization, but there's other ways that you can make this fun. You can bring people on board. You can make them a part of the conversation. People like being a part of like cool tech things. Have them submit ideas. Let them know if you were successful. But most importantly, you must be an evangelist for this process at your organization. You have to talk about it all the time. Talk about it at the weekly meeting. What are you working on? What did you try? What didn't work? Is there a memo you can send out where you share like screenshots or cool GIFs like that that show people what you changed on the site and what you were able to prove? I'll wrap this up before takeaways. This is one of our favorite books in the office. You should test that. It's a great book on A/B testing. This is your new mantra. When people come to you and say, we should do this thing on the site, you should test that. It's a great way to like pacify people and also get them to do what you want. So we just want to be thinking about this when we're going forward. We want to be able to prove that our ideas are effective. We want to know that the money we're spending on our websites is effective and it's going to work and it's actually going to create change. So just something to keep in mind as you head out of this conference and back to your desks. Really quickly, 5 takeaways to keep in mind. 1, infrastructure is essential. You have to log into Google Analytics. I'm sorry. Go in, check it out. It's not as scary as you might think, I promise. Make sure your data is looking good and make sure it's going to put you in a good place to run effective tests. Data over instinct. You can't just change the button because you want to. Look at your data, see where it points you, find those areas of high opportunity. Always, always, always think like a user. They are telling you what they want with their actions, so listen to them. Remembering this is a process, it's a mindset, and it really thrives in a culture of experimentation. If that culture isn't there, build it for yourself. I love what Jennifer said about like a micro culture existing in your office. How can you create that just on your team? And finally, you can start Monday. I'm recognizing that you are leaving this conference with a huge to-do list, and I literally just came at you with like a 10-step plan for a whole other thing that you weren't even thinking about until you got here. Baby steps. Check that box, get rid of spam in your GA account, start thinking about your website, maybe install Optimize, and then you don't have to do anything else next week. Save it, but now you know this is something that is a possibility for you. There are ways to improve our websites that are not just major website redesigns. Thanks, y'all. Thank you. Do I have time for questions? Okay. We're done! Wow. I think we have like 2 minutes for questions, and then I'm going to be outside drinking like a glass of wine the size of my face. So anyone can please come talk to me then. Any questions? There's one there. Hi.
Let's say you are going through a website. You're going through a website redesign right now, and
Yes.
It's been like 5 or 6 years since the last one.
Okay.
And if you've had Google Analytics installed for all of that time, you have a lot of historical data that you've drawn a lot of valuable conclusions about your audience from.
Mm-hmm.
How important is that data moving forward, and how much do you want to avoid making comparisons between what you knew and what you want to learn moving forward?
Great, that's a great question. Historical data on your old website is so valuable to inform your website redesign and also to think about performance before and after. I'm always hesitant to like encourage a pre-post analysis because of that correlation causation thing. But if you do have that historical warehouse of Google Analytics data and it's good, it's high quality data, there's none of those issues we talked about earlier, it's so valuable going into that website redesign because you can say, here's what our users are doing with the current setup, here's what they like, here's what they don't like, here's this module that we thought was important that they're telling us is not important, they're not clicking on it, they're not watching video. These are things we know are important. It's gonna help you focus on which templates to prioritize in your redesign. So it's amazing that you have those years and years of data, and if you're still in a place where it's possible, I'd recommend conducting some sort of analysis that you can pass on to your developers, because it's gonna give them a really good kind of starting point for priorities. And then when the site is launched, we wanna make sure the tracking is still good, and we're able to say, here's how the new site compares, here's how the old site compared. I would be like hesitant to say, exactly one versus the other. After the new site launches, that's a great opportunity to bring in A/B testing because it's going to be a vast improvement from the old site, but it's by no means perfect, and you can keep growing iteratively, so you don't have to wait 5 or 6 years to the next one. Maybe one more? Hi, Morgan.
Thank you. We did a website redesign about 4 years ago or so, but in this past year, we hired a new artistic programming director, and who wants to come in, with certain changes for the website based on programming, which makes total sense. How would we integrate and use optimization to make those changes, but also be data-driven with it and understand, how the previous version of the redesign and the post version of the same website in essence would work?
So your artistic director is looking to make changes to the website, but maybe you're just trying to tread carefully? Is that what it is?
A little bit, but there's also some necessary changes because programming is changing as well.
Right, absolutely. I think, again, a kind of analysis of the current site is going to be really helpful. It's going to tell you, is what users are doing, does that align with what we're hoping to change from our website? You're going to know which content is most popular already. especially if you set up those content groupings, you're going to be able to do really effective analysis around where people are already going on the website and which sections are most important. And then that maybe can like narrow the conversation a little bit to, these are our top templates. How can we make small changes to them that kind of move it in the direction that we're interested in? How can we merge institutional values with what our users want? You know, it can't be 100% one way or another, but I think some sort of like pre-analysis of the existing data. And then if you're not ready to fully redesign the site, A/B testing can happen before a website redesign. It is a good way if you're going to be stuck with that website for a while to test those changes that she's thinking about. Again, you should test that before actually, you know, going like whole hog into it with developers. So maybe figure out what their biggest priorities are, see if that aligns with what you're seeing in the data, and then execute a few tests to see if you can tweak a few things on the site.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right, I think that's all we have time for, you guys. Thank you so much. Please stay for a drink.